So recording has now started for...
All right, I'll just give everyone a few seconds to come on in. And if you could just let me know when the lobby is empty, please, Carl.
It's Nicole from Seoul.
Yes. Yeah. This is,
Where are you?
nicest-
Your hotel?
yeah, at the hotel. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my God.
So we got the room until about 2 o'clock this afternoon, and we head to the airport at 3. So last
Dedication. What
day.
time is it now?
10 a.m. It's -6 outside, so you know I have to
Oh
stay
my
inside.
goodness,
Sad
man.
for me. It's
Yeah.
freezing.
Thank you so much for joining us, Nicole. Really
That's all right.
appreciate that. Yeah, that's really good.
Hey,
Okay,
Dane.
so I have
Yeah.
Dane's in the room. Hi, Dane.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Hi.
are we pretty ready to start?
Yes, we are.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, everyone. So look, a good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this AFIS webinar. My name is Nick Lawler, and I'm the CEO of Advocacy for Inclusion. I'd like to start off by acknowledging that we are meeting on the lands of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Canberrans and respect their elders past and present. As AFI thanks the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people for their ongoing custodianship for the plains, mountains and rivers of Canberra. Sovereignty was never ceded, and this was and always will be Aboriginal land. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today to mark our event for the UN International Day of People with Disability as we launch our publications from the AFI NDIS Review Conversations Project, What We Heard. Firstly, I will begin with some housekeeping. So as this is a webinar, your microphone, video and chat functions are turned off. Now, Carla, I'm just confirming that's still okay with some of the technical difficulties we've had. That's all good?
Yeah, that's all good.
Excellent. So we will be posting some resources in the chat with AFI's contact details if you'd like to get in touch with us later after this forum or during the forum, of course. We invite you to sit back, relax and listen as we share what we've heard and what we've learned after a year of NDIS stories. So AFI, we are proud to have been selected by Women with Disabilities Australia to deliver a project funded by the Australian government to engage with NDIS participants and gather their views, experiences and suggestions of the NDIS to help inform the NDIS review. Joining us today, we are delighted to have 3 of our NDIS project participants, Sumon, Lou Bannister and Dane McCormick. Nicole Lee, President of People with Disability Australia, thank you for joining us all the way from Seoul, Korea, which is an amazing feat. Thank you, Nicole. Matt Wright, who is the acting branch manager, and Jordan MacArthur, assistant manager from the National Disability Insurance Agency. And AFI staff, Craig Wallace, Head of Policy, and Rosalind Emmerich, Senior Policy Officer. This year has been a big year for AFI in the NDIS space. Earlier in the year, we marked 10 years of the NDIS in the ACT. We reflected on where we were, where we are now, and where we hope to be 10 years from now with the NDIS. The AFI NDIS Conversations Project offered us a different opportunity to engage directly with NDIS participants to hear their thoughts, ideas, suggestions, and dreams for the NDIS. And today, AFI are launching our publication from this project, which we are very excited to do. When we started engagement around the NDIS, we really weren't sure if there would be one, let alone 3 publications. But when we started hearing the stories of participants, excuse me, and the way they touched on various but connecting themes, it didn't take long for us to realize they deserve to find a broad audience in a valued setting. We asked what has been lost and what has been gained, importantly, and the different publications invite us to talk about whether the outcomes delivered met the expectations of users or whether people are disappointed. Often, as you will hear from people today and read from these stories, the reality falls somewhere in between. Sometimes people found their way to good outcomes in spite of red tape or errors while overcoming gaps in the service, misunderstandings and difficult processes. Sometimes the hurdles felt so confronting that people questioned whether the journey was worth the time. But they also speak to the transformative and beneficial changes that the NDIS has brought into the lives of people with a disability in Canberra. Against all odds, dozens of reviews and two changes of government, the scheme has transformed the lives of Canberrans with disability. Despite kinks in the road, none of us wants to go back to the capped and rationed system before the NDIS. Turning now to the reports themselves, I'm delighted to hand over to you to Rosalind Emmerich. Rosalind's AFI Senior Policy Officer, and she's going to take you through two of our publications. So without any further ado, over to you, Rosalind.
Thanks so much, Nick. I'm really excited to be taking part in today's event and launching 2 volumes from our AFI NDIS Review What We Heard report. The reports have been developed through our NDIS participant panels that we held earlier in the year. Before I take you through some of the report findings, I'd like to firstly take this opportunity to thank all of our NDIS participants who took part in the appreciative inquiry and the depth interviews. Max Hardy from Max Hardy Consulting, our facilitator, who expertly led participants through our appreciative inquiry, and Jessie Forbes from Articulus, who turned hours and hours of depth interview transcripts into an informative, highly synthesized report. Thank you. And so now turning to the report and the findings, I'm going to share my screen with you. It's a bit of a PowerPoint presentation. So if you just bear with me as the technology does its magic, hopefully that's going to work for you. Can everyone start to see that coming through? Loading. Thumbs up if anyone can see. Everyone can see that. Thank you, Nick. Thank you. All right, thank you. So I'm just going to take you through that. So Advocacy for Inclusion's NDIS review findings, what we heard. So I'll take you through firstly just our role and why we undertook the work, what the purpose was, and how did we achieve our goal. So as part of the NDIS review consultation process, AFI was contracted by Women with Disabilities Australia, who were funded by the Australian government, to hear feedback from people with disability about the NDIS. The purpose of our consultations was to listen to NDIS participants' suggestions to ways in which the NDIS could improve in areas such as NDIS customer service and market and workforce issues. So how do we achieve this? So we selected a group of people with lived experience of using the NDIS through an expression of interest. We used different feedback methodologies to gather this information, and the 2 different consultation formats we used were an appreciative inquiry and depth interviews. So an appreciative inquiry, I'll take you through what's an appreciative inquiry, what our areas of focus were, and what we heard from participants through the appreciative inquiry. So an appreciative inquiry is a way of looking at change which focuses on identifying and doing more of what is already working, rather than looking for problems and trying to fix them. We chose this format to look at customer service and participant interactions with NDIS staff because we know that people with disability are having lots of interactions with the NDIS. As people with disability report both good and bad NDIS interactions, we saw this as an opportunity to build on what works for people, as well as imagining what excellent experiences could look and feel like. Our appreciative inquiry took place online over 4 hours, which offered participants in the group time to elaborate on each of our areas of focus. So we focused our appreciative inquiry in 3 areas: the participant journey through the NDIS, the participant charter, and an opportunity to dream. So when we looked at the participant journey, we asked the participants to name the high points and low points of first contact with the NDIS, and then we discussed scheduled and unscheduled contact with the agency. When we looked at the NDIS participant charter, we asked the participants to share stories of better, if not exceptional, customer service, based on the NDIS participant journey. And then we asked people to dream. So to dream, if those experiences of better, if not exceptional customer service were the norm and not the exception, what would that be like? And then we asked for suggestions for improving customer experience according to the participant charter. And what we heard, so through that process, we heard such a wide range of views and suggestions from participants who highlighted a number of areas where communication was working well and where it needed improvement. Participants provided ideas and markers for an improved customer contact ecosystem for the NDIS, which could be developed and mapped to compliance with the NDIS participant charter. So some of those suggestions from participants included things like a strength-based approach, maximising those communication features which were seen as working well, such as web chat, improvements to the language and reports so that participants can understand them, improve centralised information and corporate memory on clients, especially during handovers, including a central shared participant file, and improve capacity to be flexible and nimble with funding during a package period. So that was our appreciative inquiry. So moving on to the depth interviews, I'll take you through similar stages of what the process was, what our areas of focus was, and what we heard. So the depth interviews, they were conducted with 5 NDIS participants with different disabilities, support packages, and arrangements. The interviews were held over a 2-hour period, which allowed time for us to take a deep dive into our areas of focus. The areas that we focused on, they were the experiences with support workers and market challenges. The style of questions differed to that of the appreciative inquiry in that they were more direct and layered to gain deeper understanding of the issues, challenges and benefits participants experienced in relation to support workers and market issues. The things that we heard during the depth interview, they were honest and open feedback from participants on their experiences with support workers and trying to access services. Across the course of the depth interview process, participants shared several compelling anecdotes demonstrating the hardship and discomfort that has resulted from not having their needs adequately addressed by market services. All right, moving on. What we heard overall. So taken together, we've developed some general reform themes which are included in our own review submission and in the 2 reports. So the things that we heard are that we need better quality information about services for clients to address mistakes and mishandling of documents and communications. We need changes to local area coordination to improve the quality of outcomes. We need more non-NDIS community and health services, quicker provision of aids, modifications and equipment to avert serious problems, more empathy for the consequences of support denials and better judgment calls and flexibility, and better training and quality of support workers in some key areas like food handling. So just my final thoughts. Each of the reports speak to the highs and lows that NDIS participants face on a daily basis in navigating both the NDIA and NDIS related supports and services. The hope with each of these reports is that they will inform positive and meaningful change in both the NDIA and the NDIS. Thank you. That's it from me. I'm going to hand back over to you, Nick. Thank you. And I'll stop sharing my screen. Hopefully it all swings
Thank you
back.
so much, Rosalind. That was terrific. Thanks, Rosalind. I would now like to pass over to Craig Wallace, Head of Policy for AFI, to launch our 3rd publication. Over to you, Craig.
Thanks, Nick. It's great to be introducing our 3rd volume of the NDIS report series called Looking Forward, Looking Back. After we held our NDIS participant inquiries, we reflected on all that we'd heard and felt that our NDIS panel participant stories, which all shared deeply personal experiences, deserved to find a wider audience. Their stories gave voice and brought to life people's highs and lows, wins and losses throughout the NDIS journey. These are experiences all of us can relate to. Ros mentioned earlier the word empathy, and I think these stories offer the chance to walk or roll in a participant's shoes for a while. Like, we could have done a piece of work that was about 100 people and presented stats and data, and we indeed did do a survey along with Women with Disabilities ACT that gave us that kind of information. But the kind of information that you're getting from the stories is different. It's about what's it actually like to be on the end of these decisions. And that's the invitation and the promise of this publication and the discussion that we're about to have. We've chosen to present these stories in a valued, accessible, and readable publication with specially commissioned photographs and designed from the team that produces the Canberra Disability Review. We gave a remit to our photographer to look at Canberra from the point of view of people with disabilities, with all of the kind of obstacles that people might find in their way. So we'd encourage you to kind of look at the publication as a whole. We've tried to put together a publication which we hope will be read widely, amplify the voices and stories of participants, and sit on people's physical and digital shelves for a while and be a reference point. We hope this will be a lasting legacy of the project. It's a review of how the scheme has been experienced, but it also invites us to look forward to the next decade. Ros has already spoken to high-level themes, but these stories, I think, speak to personal consequences. In 2033, perhaps people will revisit these stories and look forward again to ponder the NDIS that they want in 2043. For if there is one thing that I think we all agree on, it is that the National Disability Insurance Scheme is worth the journey and worth the continued advocacy and fighting, that it's a good, solid reform, even if there are kinks on the way. Today, we will launch this publication by coming together with some of the contributors to the project to go through the stories. Please note that the views of the NDIS participants taking part in today's webinar are their own personal views, not necessarily the views of their employer or of anybody else that they're associated with. It's my pleasure to introduce three of the contributors to our NDIS review work, Simone, Lou Bannister and Dane McCormack, and invite them to share their reflections. To get a national perspective and an international perspective, we will then hear from Nicole, the President of People with Disability Australia, to discuss what she heard and took away from the stories. Simone, I might invite you to start us off, if you can, by spending a few minutes reflecting on the stories as a whole and telling us what resonated with you. Maybe there's something that surprised you. What do you want people to take away from these stories? Over to you.
Thank you, Craig, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak here. I guess there's a few things that really resonated. One, despite differences in disability, functioning, background, I was surprised how similar the stories are in terms of getting difficulty in getting access to NDIS and also getting access to vital equipment that people need in their day-to-day lives. Particularly the Hazel story about not being able to get to the bathroom in her unmodified home really demonstrated how our basic human rights and needs are not met. And the story shows that when it works, NDIS is really wonderful and life-changing, but when it doesn't, it leaves many of us in the lurch, and we're fighting for a necessity like being able to take a shower, going to the toilet, go to a medical appointment, use our wheelchair. And I found the common thing, as Ross and Craig already said, about finding the right support workers a challenge. My experience is that people want easy shifts, like going out for coffee or going to museums. So for example, Nadia's story with her multiple chemical sensitivities and things that she needs to avoid to not get sick, and people not wanting to work with her because she's too difficult. So that's a thing that keeps coming, and that really resonated with me. And I guess like I want people to understand that we are human just like everyone else, and see us as a human being, and that like listening to our stories with an open mind. Thank you.
Thanks for Simon for sharing that. Particularly appreciate the emphasis on listening to stories and maintaining an open mind and personal consequences. Lou, would you now like to reflect on the stories and what resonated with you, what surprised you, and what would you like people to take away from this? You might need to unmute, Lou.
Accessing the NDIS has been truly life-changing, but it struck me reading everybody's stories that it shouldn't be this hard. We're all spending really valuable time fighting for basic support needs that should be readily provided. And the system that's supposed to be making our lives easier and better is actually breaking many of us, which I think is a very sad indication that the bureaucracy has got in the way of the original vision of the scheme. I think what came out for me reading the stories was that there needs to be much more two-way open communication between the NDIA and the participants. The processes need to be transparent, and the participants need to be able to be kept regularly informed as to how their applications are progressing and whether any additional information might be needed to clarify things and make the process much smoother. It shouldn't be a silent black hole that you make your submission into and then you have to anxiously wait for a response for an undetermined amount of time, and then you suddenly get a negative at the very end of that process with very little explanation as to why your application was denied. So people are quite traumatized by that process, and I think we need to really make it a partnership we should be working closely with the NDIA each step of the way to make sure communication is clear, that information is flowing properly in both directions, and that if there's something simple I can provide to clarify something to my delegate, let me do that. If my delegate needs something, they should contact me and ask me, not just automatically tick a no box. I think the ongoing drama of not being seen as an expert is also an issue. We're all experts of our own bodies and our own ways of dealing with things. We spend a fortune in OT reports, or the NDIA spends a fortune in OT reports to get expert advice, and then that seems to be completely disregarded and ignored when you're being assessed. So why are we forking out for all of these reports for our equipment and our lifestyle needs when those reports are then denied? And I believe part of that process is that the actual reporting process is cumbersome. Why do I need a 30 to 50 page report every time I want an item that goes into details of whether I can stand to clean my teeth or not, when I might just be asking for a handrail or a ramp? Why do they need if I need to know whether I can clean my teeth by myself? So the report needs to be, you need to have an overall assessment, I suppose, initially, so that people know what your baseline is. And then you just need to should be able to just submit little requests and for a specific piece of equipment that just looks at your needs for that piece of equipment, not at your entire existence that takes a 50 page report that nobody's going to read in the long run anyway. So I can feel people's frustration because they keep going through these circles and they still have to fight every step of the way. But I'm hoping that with this wonderful process that we've just been through, and with the reports that have been written, that we can shed some light on how things need to progress and how to build those relationships with the people we need to in the organisation to improve communication and actually make the system work the way it was meant to work. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Thanks, Lou. I think that was a very good use of your soapbox and summarised a number of the themes that we've seen coming through systemically. Particularly, I was just writing, it's simplicity. It's about trust. It's about valuing the inherent knowledge people have got of their own circumstances and disabilities, leading to empowerment and also leading to an understanding of consequences when you don't do that or when those things are misaligned. So thank you. Not soapboxing, very good summary.
I mean, we need to allow people to be able to try things out and take risks to see whether things work for them or not. We can't just automatically slot them into a little box because we think that's where they should go. So we need to introduce that dignity of risk concept that we all bandy around the words occasionally. But I think it is an important part of the process that people need to be able to try things out and be funded to try things to see if it actually works for them, rather than just being told, no, that's not reasonable or necessary. You can't try that. You know, that's not something that you've done before. Why should we fund it now? Type thing. So yes.
That's right. We never get to fail. Like, it's everything in disabled people's lives needs to be done within a structure. So there's no amount of slippage. I'm sure we'll come back to that as we sort of move forward. Dane, I'd just like to turn to you. Would you like to offer some reflections on what you read in the stories and what resonated with you, what surprised you, and what would you like people to take away from all of this?
Thank you, Craig. Much appreciated. Have a chat. Yeah, there's some common themes emerging, and one of them is difficulty navigating the system, and different people need different ways of doing it. Some people can log onto a website and find it out. Others need someone to sit down with them and go through it. And it's about understanding what those needs are from the participant's point of view and sort of working with them there. Another issue, there's probably needs to be a complaints process in here somewhere, because if we've got an issue with a worker or the service, then is there somewhere we can go to say there's an issue here? And then there needs to be a process behind that where you get feedback from it as well, because you don't want to disappear into a black hole, as we've discussed. But yeah, the biggest issue I've seen is that people do not understand disability and the supports that people need. And there's not enough that the two-way conversation, which we've talked about. And I've recently started with a program called the Employment Plus program down here in Tasmania. And they're producing a video of who I am. It's around employment initially, who I am and where I want to go and what my disability is and what that means to me and what the supports that I need. And that's just a really good, it's a couple of minute video that you can send to people, and they'll understand yourself, but the participant better and what they need. And you're going to extend that into health professionals as well. So produce one for health professionals so they know who you are and what you need before you go in to see them.
Thanks, Dane. I mean, I'm taking out of that a number of things, knowing where to go to complain. Also, I guess, two-way communications, not just operating to something that's set and forget and then walking away, and also support with navigating through all of this, perhaps particularly at the start. And we'll come back to some of that where we have our panel discussions at the moment. I'd now like to turn to our Korean correspondent, Nicole Lee, who's joining us all the way from Seoul in Korea, where she's on some international human rights work. Nicole is the president of People with Disability Australia and a good friend to AFI and to the disability rights movement. Welcome, Nicole. Would you like to reflect on what you've just heard, perhaps what you've got from the publication, if you've had time to read and absorb it all, and what you kind of what's the advocacy that we need to do now?
Well,
I think like the report is really brilliant in the fact that it acknowledges just where we've come from and to where we are now, and but this is a huge bit of government and legislative reform. So to think that they would have gotten it right at the get-go is it's next to impossible. But 10 years in, we can actually see a lot of the changes. But this document really sets out to policymakers that individual journey, that journey mapping for people. So it's not just numbers on pages. It's not just hours of support work. It's not just allocated funds. This is the legwork, for want of a better word, that people with disability are going through on a day-to-day basis to access this, transformative area of support. So that it's so vital in in our work, in our advocacy work moving forward with the NDIA. Once we get hold of this review and once we see what it's looking like, this is the people's lived experience, and this mapping of the personal journey, this empathy map kind of thing, if you want to put it that way, is something that we can use in our advocacy around. Well, any and all of the changes that they do make post NDIS review has to be done in that co-design space, but also handing this to the agency and getting all of their workers who are working with working groups doing that co-design piece before they even get into that room, looking at the user experience, looking at what people are going through, looking at what is potentially the experience for the people in that working group that they're going to be working with and co-designing reforms with, have been through. So they've already got an understanding of what it's been like for us, so they can actually understand why sometimes we come into that room a little bit frustrated, a little bit at the end of our tether. We've been pushing the wheelbarrow through the door for so long. You need to fix this, you need to fix that. This is arduous, this is exhausting, this is wearing people out. This is too much burden on people with disability to have to constantly navigate these ridiculous hoops. So for them to actually read that, have that understanding of the people in the room, cuts out a lot of the advocacy work that we have to do every time we go into that room. We're having to constantly restate, this is people's journey, this is what they've been through, these are the hurdles, and you need to understand that. So with this review, this is a really, really brilliant piece of work as far as the agency understanding us, working in that co-design space, how to work with us, and how to understand what our lives have been like. When it comes down to policy, they could possibly, this will also inform, well, where are they doubling up on things? Where is the overburden of paperwork on us and the administrative burden? And how can they look to and seek to cut down on a lot of that stuff? Because if they're looking to cut down on the cost of the scheme, this paperwork that we have to get, as Louise said, all of those reports from OTs, all of these things to prove that, maybe I can stand to brush my teeth, doesn't really matter. All of those things cost money from our OTs, cost time on their side to have to then go through a report to find out whether or not somebody can clean their teeth or not independently. So it really will highlight to them the ways in which they're wasting time, resources and money as well, which is going to be a huge part of this reform moving forward. And it'll centre a lot of the advocacy. I know for you and definitely with PWDA, I'm hoping that we will take this report on board as well, that it will also inform the work that we've gotten from our members, collate the two together and use that in all of our systemic advocacy to ministers, to the NDIA, to whoever along the way, agency staff and things, that when we're talking with them and advocating with them around what this should look like, and actually and standing our ground too. This actually backs our advocacy work and our systemic advocacy work, because we have to stand our ground with these reforms. We have to stand our ground with what we want this NDIS to look like, and that our voices need to be front and centre and inform all of their decisions. This actually gives us that language to say, well, people with disability on the NDIS said X, Y, Z. This is what they've said, so this is why we're asking, and this is why we want X, Y, Z to happen, so to speak. So it's rich. It's definitely reflective of my own experience and everybody else that I've heard from. The fact that we just know this intrinsically. It's funny that we have to put it on paper for them to get an understanding of what we know every single day from our friends, ourselves, our colleagues. We're all jumping the same hoops. We're all navigating the same ridiculous hurdles. Yet we have to really spell it out for them. And this, honestly, it does in a human and an empathetic centered way, it's very easy to overlook the hurdles when you don't put the human experience behind it. This puts the human element into the experience, which makes it much harder for somebody to, dismiss it or not want to do the job properly or not implement things with the community involved. So, I want to say thank you to everybody involved in this and to AFI for putting it together, because it's really vital. It gives that human element to the problem, that it's not just a scheme with numbers and and all of the really negative language that the way the NDIS has been spoken of over the years. We've become the political football. This is us taking that agency back, via these stories, and taking back that narrative and saying, these are our lives. We're not here for political fodder to win or lose elections or to score points against another party. These are our lives. This stuff matters. This is a huge piece of reform. Our country should be proud of this, and we should be doing everything possible to strengthen it. So in 10 years' time, like you said, Craig, we'll look back on this and go, okay, now where to from here? This is what we did over the last 10 years, informed from that. Where are we at? And how can this actually get better? It is never, ever going to finish being refined. The longer the scheme goes on, the more we're going to have to refine it. It is never a set and done, this will work forever. It's always going to have to be iterative. It's always going to have to be reviewed and changed and adapted and improved no matter what. So it's a really, really positive step forward, and it gives me some sense of hope with the review, because it's very anxiety provoking, the review. I don't think anybody in this room is not feeling anxious over what's coming. Any change is scary, but this gives us a lot of language to lean on, which hopefully gives some people in the community some sense of reassurance that their voices are heard, their experience has been conceptualized and understood, and that it's not going to not count, so to speak. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Nick. And we're sort of sliding into the panel conversation now, but I want to stay with you just for a second, Nick. There's a risk, isn't there? Like with stories like this that provide a really sort of deep insight into people's lives, that they show that people's lives are often difficult. They tend to highlight the challenges and problems with the NDIS. And we are in a kind of toxic environment, which you'd know as an advocate, where public spending is contested and people are trying to pick it apart and sort of say, well, because there's been difficulties along the way, is this whole thing worth it?
Yeah.
So I'd kind of invite you to is it worth it? Are we actually all better off because there is an NDIS? How and can you dream of ever going back to the old
yes,
ration system?
Yeah, I think there's value in us writing something or doing a piece on that. Just highlighting to people what our lives were like before the NDIS, what it was like to get 3 hours a week and to use that 3 hours for a shower, changing the sheets on the bed, getting groceries, and having to ration funds to put a wheelchair together, cobbling together a wheelchair out of bits of old wheelchairs to try and save funds. You got $1,200 towards a chair that might have been $5,000 to $10,000. People don't actually understand, unless you lived that life, you don't know what it was like. And for all the faults of the NDIS, and we've all reflected this, for all the faults of the NDIS compared to what we had before, this is brilliant. This is a reform that other countries around, other nations around the world should be looking to implement. And like I said, no, it hasn't been gotten right. To expect that they got it 100% perfect at the very beginning is asking for the magical unicorn. And for talking in euphemisms here, it's impossible. Of course, it's worth the investment. And it's that narrative constantly, that are we worth investing in? Well, look at the value of what we do. I don't know how to sort of, scream that enough from the rooftops, investing in our lives and what we're capable of doing if you give us the resources and time to actually do that. But, there's to say that this isn't worth doing. It would be to see this end. I can't imagine going back to the old scheme. None of us could. And to see this end would, government-wise, it's such a backward step. It's such a regressive, move to make. But, to sort of really rein it all in and cut people out also isn't the answer. We don't want to be, closing the door to a different way of life to some people, but allowing others in. Because we all know what that was like to live on that old scheme, and we never want to go back. But it's sort of getting people to understand that, like, whilst we're critiquing the system right now, yes, we're saying about the burden and everything, but the thing is, this system was meant to, address that burden. It was meant to make our lives easier. We weren't meant to have to be going in to beg for the right and the resources to live another 12 months of our lives with the services and supports that we need to live that life. We were never meant to be in there fighting every year. No one else in this country has to go into a room and front someone every 12 months to 24 months and justify their reason to exist for another 12 to 24 months. Nobody else in this country has to do that, but we have to do that. And that's a fault that's come into the scheme that was never intended to actually be there to begin with. And we're never meant to be going in there feeling like somebody was trying to cut costs or cost save. So, a lot of the things that have crept in are due to a lot of stigmas and as you said, Craig, around that, is this value for money, or is this worth investing in? It's kind of like having a Centrelink conversation, well, how can we cut the costs, how we can cut the funding for that? That's not what this scheme was meant to be. So, as far as reform goes, yes, those things need to be addressed. That overburden needs to be addressed. And we need to shift people's attitudes around, investing in our lives, that it is worth it. Because for too often, many of us go up in front of a delegate that's read all of those narratives in the community, has read and heard the things coming out of the political sphere, and take that unintentionally into those planning sessions and clouds their opinions and judgments of us. So we need to really use this point in time as a way of shifting that attitude towards us, getting back to the intent of the scheme, the investment. Invest in our lives now so that we can contribute later. Invest in our lives now so that our disabilities don't get worse because we're using broken wheelchairs or we don't have an accessible bathroom. That saves money on the system long term. We need to go back to those core principles and remind people this is what it was for, because without it, it's going to cost you a hell of a lot more, because as we age, without the support needs that the NDIS provides us, ultimately, we're going to cost the system a lot more due to our bodies breaking down when they didn't need to, needing care or going into care when we could be living in our own homes and working, or not being, and then also not being able to work because we don't have the resources. Reminding people that this was an investment insurance scheme and that investing in disabled people's lives is always worth it, and it should be a non-negotiable. And if they want to come and live a life in our day and in the life of what we had before in the old system, by all means, I'll set it up and I'll invite them in and they can come and live that life on what we lived on before.
Thanks, Nick. That's a very good elevator pitch to use, I think, for what this has meant in the continuation of it. I'm looking around our panel for other people, without putting too far upon it, who can remember the before time. And one of the people that I know was instrumental in this journey in the ACT, along with people like Sue Salthouse and Sean and many others, is Lou Bannister. Lou, do you want to reflect on, like, are we better off as a whole because of NDIS, and what would it mean to go back? And in a sense, do you think we've kind of gone back a bit anyway? Like, what's your thinking about what it was like before?
Well, before, for me, it was really truly a lottery, because the only access I had to any funding was the ACT Quality of Life grants, which was the annual grants where if you were very happened to be lucky that year, you might get up to $5,000 funding towards an item, a wheelchair or whatever you needed. But it was a bit of a lucky dip. It depended how many people applied, because it was a limited bucket of funds. And so it was sort of, and there seemed to be themes during some years, so that if people applied for a particular item and it wasn't the theme for the year, they'd be denied that year. And it was sort of all very uncertain. You were not certain of whether you're going to be able to get some assistance or not. I'm very lucky because I I've been able to work, and so I've not been on the social security system. But I know that people that are just struggle so hard to actually have any access to the things that they needed when they in the before scheme. So I think the NDIS definitely has made a change. I'm worried that the scheme is still focused on the medical and deficit models of disability. I think we need to embrace creating potentials and capabilities rather than seeing people with disabilities as a burden, because we know if you can give people with disabilities full access to their communities, they will shine in their potential and become taxpayers and valuable members of the community. But they need to have that access. So we need to improve the way our communities are structured physically, so the built environment, as well as society attitudes towards people with disabilities. We're not burdens. Given the right supports and given true access, we are valuable assets, and we need to be seen as that.
Thanks, Lou. I'd like to keep to that theme a bit with Dane. What's the NDIS actually changed for you, Dane? And what are you working on now? What has it enabled you to create and do?
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Yeah, it's helping me out a lot with the brain injury and the supports that I need, the treatment that I can get. I did need more support around finding those treatments, but once you find them, they're really good. And yeah, it's I'm publishing my first book this year, which has come out of my journey as well. Because I lost my long-term memories, I set off on a mighty quest to find it and wrote my autobiography and emphasised just how important history is. So I'm now writing a series of history articles and books with a personal connection. And yeah, I've reached back into my career. I couldn't do the wide thinking to develop business strategies anymore, so I've reached back and doing policy work and those kind of things. It's helped
and you're
out a
doing
lot.
some fact sheets and supports for people with other people with brain injury, is that right?
Oh yes, so yes, I was released from hospital and I searched for a brain injury support group in Canberra and there wasn't one, so I'm working with Synapse to establish it. And yeah, Tasmania are working with Victoria to do a brain assist pack. And that's when someone gets a brain injury, it's just a small pack of information about what to expect and where treatment options are and those kind of things. So just really something simple to help them out when they're in that initial stages to get the supports they need. And we'll roll that out of Canberra as well.
So I guess it's great that you were able to kind of, I guess, create your own services in a way. Were there services when you were getting on the NDIS that you would have liked to have been able to find or couldn't find, or was there information that might have helped you find services more easily?
Yeah, they need more information about to find services. The services were there, you just needed to find them, and there's not anyone there guiding you or recommending or letting you know. You need to find it yourself.
So did you just get a list given to you?
You get to find it to the
services?
website. So there's a list
Yeah.
of services there, yeah.
Yeah. And so how do you work out what's good or what's open or what's really here in the ACT? Like, was that really hard?
Yeah, you just need to go and have a look and see what's available and see if it applies to what you think will help you. You're not getting any guidance as what will actually help you.
And what might have helped you? Is it a person? Is it a website? Sitting down with an advocate? Is it ratings from other people with brain injury? Like, is there something more that would have made that a bit easier to do?
I think it's a medical professional in the first instance to help people understand what they need to get the treatment they need. What treatment do they need? There's 1,000 different options for treatment out there, but which ones would help in your situation? That helps you narrow it down.
Okay, and it probably is about the resources that they have as well. When you're talking to medical professionals, do they know much about the NDIS?
It depends on who you're talking to, I think. Some people do and some people don't.
Yeah, okay, bit uneven. Yeah, thanks for that. Look, if you've all just read the stories and reflected on them, who else should read them? That's perhaps not in this forum today. Like the NDIS, the NDIA consumer people are here, and we'll be hearing from them in a second. But are there are there other people or leaders or advocates that you would really want to read the stories like you've just done and be reflecting on them? And I might, Simon, do you want to start us off? If not, that's fine. We can just go on to someone else.
Hi, thanks, Craig. Yeah, I'd love to give my so basically for me, like I think everyone who has anything to do with NDIS should read these stories. So that includes like politicians, policymakers, frontline staff, LAC delegates, advocates, researchers, providers, basically everyone. And I really hope that these stories get shared and read really widely. And as I mentioned before, so that people see us and hear us, we're not the statistics and a number. And then, I mean, unless you're really, really, really lucky, most of us will come up with a disability before we die of old age. So this is like, an experience that would help a lot of people. And I guess for me, like understanding and awareness is the first step in change in anything. And a lot of most people who are like, working on NDIA, NDIS are there for the right reason. They want to help people with disability. They want to improve things. So I guess like it's just giving them the tools to understand what's happening, where are the bits that can be improved and things like that. So yes, everyone, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Simon. So Lou, you're in an elevator, and the elevator gets stuck. You've got the stories with you. Who would you like to be in the elevator? And you could make them sort of sit there for 30 minutes and read the stories and reflect on them.
I would definitely like all of the ACT ministers to be crammed into the lift with me, so I could bend their ear, because I think they are responsible for their individual departments and directorates, and they need to make sure their staff are fully aware of how their particular offices impact on people's lives. And it's not just the NDIA, it's all of the directorates that have impacts on our lives. So I think I would like to have all of the MLAs crammed into a very large lift with me, so that I could make sure they all read it, and then promise to make all their staff read it when they return to their offices.
Thanks, Lou. So Lou's crowded elevator gets fixed and opened up again, and Dane, you're popping into the elevator. You've got the stories with you. Who would you like to be there so that you can talk to them or make them read them?
Yeah, that's the service providers and the plan managers, and yeah, everyone who has a personal connection with us that we're going to see. Yeah, I think everyone needs to understand it better. We need to understand it ourselves better, really. Quite often we need their help to get us to understand what supports we need as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks. So service providers, and also understanding your own journey a little bit so that you can relate it is a theme. I wasn't going to go to Lou, but to Nicole. But do you want to, like, your mystery person?
My mystery people in the lift would be, all the members on the crossbench in Parliament that we usually have to rally behind us when they're going to push through a change, which we had to do with the Liberal Party many times. I'd like to have all of them in that room and for them to read it. The Shadow NDIS Minister, Michael Sukkar, I'd like him to read this and actually have an understanding of our lives, because I don't think he quite gets it. But lots of different ministers across both parties, I would like them to read this, and their advisors, so that when they're looking at making changes, they can actually understand the human element behind those changes. And Treasury at the moment, I would like Treasury to read this, to actually get that we're not just numbers on a page, we're not just the bottom dollar and the red line, so to speak, to actually understand the human experience behind the NDIS and also the changes it's made. So I'd be grabbing all of them into the lift, so when we rally against them, we'll go, that report right there, remember that, this is why we're pushing. That's who I'd have in the lift.
Thanks, Nicole. I think you might be in a bit of luck. We've actually had some engagement with Senator Pocock's office, who I think are in the room today. So they're in the virtual elevator with us. Look, just the other thing I'd just ask is, and I might direct this to Lou, if you were a delegate and read these, how would you feel? How might you make decisions differently, noting the finite resources, taxpayers' money? Like, what would you do as a delegate?
I would really concentrate on developing the partnership with the participant to get that communication channel working properly. So if I read all the reports, but I'm not quite sure how that's going to impact the participant, talk to the participant, contact them, talk to their support people, their carers, their family, find out how things impact this person in a way that will actually properly inform my decision as a delegate. So I think it's all about getting those communications channels open and the process is really transparent, and to have that two-way conversation. So building that rapport and getting to know, I mean, it might only be a half-hour meeting, but getting to know the person a little bit that you're actually making huge decisions for that will impact their lives. You need to get some insights into why they're asking for that particular support and funding. So
thanks, Lou. We're running a little bit behind time, so I might just quickly staying with you, Lou. One thing we're about to hear from the NDIA, who are going to reflect on this. One thing that you'd maybe want them to take away.
oh boy.
You can skip if you like.
Don't just automatically think I've got to save funding and block funding. Step back and think, how is these decisions going to impact somebody's life if I just blithely say no to something? Really think about how you can, while you're there, as you're hopefully improving someone's quality of life. So don't just disregard things very blithely.
Sorry, I did the mute thing. Dane, one thing you'd like the NDIA to take away from the stories?
To help everyone understand people's disability better, take the time to understand it before you interact with them. Yeah.
Okay, understanding disabilities. Thanks very much, Simone. If you've got one thing.
Questioning to be a thing of the past, and that we are believed all the time when we say we need stuff.
Yeah, rationing and believing what we say. Thanks very much. Look, that wraps up the panel end of this, but thank you very much for sharing so generously and so insightfully and spending the time to go through the stories with us. I'll hand back to Nick to introduce the NDIA to offer their reflections at this point.
Thank you so much, Craig. And look, I have to say thank you to Simon, Lou, Dane, and Nicole for sharing your valuable insights and observations. That was really powerful. Thank you. I'd like to now invite Matt Wright, the acting branch manager in the Communications and Engagement Division at the NDIA, to receive the report, certainly, but to acknowledge the feedback and offer some of his reflections on what he's just heard. So, Matt, are you with us?
I am here. So thanks, Nick. And I have Jordan MacArthur with me here, who's from the community engagement team. Just to let everyone know that I'm deaf and using hearing aids through Bluetooth to be part of this conversation today. I really want to thank Nick Lawler and Craig Wallace and the Advocacy Inclusion team for collecting this valuable feedback and inviting us to be here. I've worked closely with Craig in the past. And I also wanted to acknowledge Nicole Lee, the Board Chair of People with Disability Australia. I have met you before, Nicole, but hi. And I also want to thank all of you for sharing your personal stories. We know the best way to achieve a better NDIS is by listening to people with disability and their supporters. And these stories are a really important way to ensure that your voice is heard and improving the scheme. I think advocacy for inclusion and organisations like Advocacy for Inclusion provide a really good vehicle and a really safe space for these conversations. But I also want to say that we do have a participant first branch where you can share your views about how you can improve the scheme, and Jordan's going to just put a link to participant first as well. I just also want to acknowledge the considerable work that you have done in compiling this report and ensuring that the voice of people with disability is paramount in the scheme, and just how powerful it was to sit there and hear all of your stories, both the positives and the things that we need to learn from. So I'm happy to acknowledge and take away your report from here. So thank you so much, Nick.
Thank you very much, Matt. And sorry, Jordan, I apologise. I was to introduce you as well. So I knew you were in the room, so welcome and thank you as well. So thanks to both of you. We do acknowledge that receiving feedback is important, but sometimes challenging. And we appreciate you being open to this, and albeit at fairly short notice as well. So thank you. Projects like this just don't happen by accident. So I'd like to again just thank everyone who had worked on this. So AFI staff, Jesse, Max, Andrew, and of course our funders and partners. But above all, this would be nothing without the stories, as well as the contributions from those on the Appreciative Inquiry panel. You did take a risk with us, and that would use your stories appropriately and bring them to the attention of the people who could make a difference. And I hope we have lived up to this. Before we close, I just wanted to give a quick plug for two events which are coming up for Human Rights Day. So there is a Human Rights Office panel from 12:30 next Thursday, which AFI is speaking at. Followed by a joint AFI PWDA in conversation event with Rhonda Galbally and Craig Wallace at 6 p.m. I think Carla has dropped a link into the chat there. So thanks very much, Carla. Finally, thanks to everyone for being here and taking part today. Please do keep in touch with us via our e-news and of course, stay connected. And thank you. This concludes today's forum. And so thank you again and take care.